There's a report. You guys can, as they say, as my grandkids say, Google it. But a report that came out, CNN, and says, Republicans call Biden infrastructure program socialism. And then they ask for the money. And it goes through all of Republicans, the most conservative Republicans, who call it socialism, and how they're asking for it. A guy named Paul Gosar, he's written 3 separate letters to the administration asking for projects in his district. He says it enhanced the quality of life, that ease congestion, boost the economy. Voted against it, says it's all socialism. Go down the list. Kentucky Representative Andy Barr, the biggest socialist agenda. 3 different projects he wants, studying the importance of the safety and growth of his district. Rand Paul, I can go down the list, look it up. Socialism. I didn't know there were that many socialist Republicans. Think about it. I'm serious. Let's get serious about taking care of ordinary people, regular people like I grew up. Folks, look, you can't make this stuff up. You got to say, and I got to say, I was surprised to see so many socialists in the Republican caucus.
So it turns out that all those Republicans who derided the dangerous socialists, those reckless spenders, themselves just so happen to be dangerous socialists and reckless spenders. Funny how things change when they're not parroting bumper sticker slogans on Fox News. This is Biden calling out those Republicans by name who mocked the infrastructure package, only to turn around and plead for funding from it. Plead for funding from the same exact bill that they voted against. They didn't want anyone to have that funding, but because other people made it a reality, they feel entitled to it because it'll help them politically. Here's an idea, and I think I might be onto something here. Elect people who will actually vote for the things that are so good, they want to take credit for them. Just, for starters. Among those Republicans putting on a charm offensive is Republican lawmaker Tom Emmer of Minnesota. Now, when the law passed, he called it President Biden's multi-trillion-dollar socialist wish list. And then just a few months later, guess who wanted a piece of President Biden's multi-trillion-dollar socialist wish list? Gone were the sharp jabs and right-wing buzzwords, replaced instead by phrases like this one in his letter to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Quote, "The grant also strives to serve as a social justice measure. The completion of this project means improved economic opportunities for ethnically underserved communities." Dude literally pulled the race card to help a white Republican who voted against the bill in the first place because he wanted to hurt the party whose base is black Americans. And I hope you're sitting down for this. Emmer's request wasn't granted. There was Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville, who'd previously accused the infrastructure bill of, quote, using fuzzy math and IOUs to hide the real cost, who then appealed to Buttigieg by saying, quote, "As a former mayor, you understand better than anyone the time and money that goes into applying for highly competitive grants." I love the idea of trying to guilt Pete into allocating funding to you by complaining about having to do your job. Surely you know how much time I'm spending writing you this letter. They have me here working for my salary, the humanity, and so the least you can do is allocate funding for a law that I tried to ensure never passed. Convincing, huh? And then there was Arizona lawmaker Paul Gosar, who, when he's not helping incite insurrections on the U.S. Capitol, had previously called the infrastructure bill a, quote, phony bill that, quote, only serves to advance the America Lasts socialist agenda. Gosar went on to write not 1, not 2, but 3 letters trying to get a piece of that sweet socialist agenda by explaining that they'd enhance the quality of life, ease congestion, boost the economy, alleviate bottlenecks, and improve rural living conditions. And he's right, which is why Democrats introduced this bill in the first place. It's why they pleaded with Republicans like Paul Gosar to vote for it in the first place. So the fact that Gosar can sit there and admit all of those things about the same law that he voted against is proof that he knew about its merits all along and yet made the conscious decision to try and deprive not only his own constituents, but all Americans of those benefits, which suggests pretty damn strongly that another way to enhance the quality of life is to not elect people like Paul Gosar. Here's one of my favorites. Rand Paul voted against the infrastructure bill because it purportedly epitomized wasteful spending. And then he wrote, wait for it, 10 letters requesting a piece of that funding once the bill that he opposed actually passed. Like Paul Gosar, he explained just how advantageous it would be for his state, how it would promote continued economic development, ease congestion, improve air quality, support job growth, and have a profound national and regional significance. And like Paul Gosar, he ostensibly knew all of these things prior to it passing. It's not like the concept of funding infrastructure changed between the legislation being proposed and the legislation being passed, which means that someone who knew how beneficial it would be tried to ensure that none of those benefits were felt by his own constituents. Rand Paul's letter acknowledging the benefits of the law that he opposed is a slap in the face to every single person living in Kentucky. Now, when Buttigieg was asked about the glaring hypocrisy, he said, quote, "It's hard not to chuckle when seeing the letters from members who voted against the infrastructure law." He continued, quote, "Obviously, it's good for their districts, which is why it's probably good for America." And of course it is. Infrastructure is immensely popular. In fact, it's so popular that Trump used it as a pretend carrot on a stick for his voters for years. That's how popular it is, that the guy used it to bait voters into turning out for him. And granted, while he had no intention of actually passing any infrastructure bill, what with it not being a tax cut for himself and his rich buddies, the fact that he touted it is still admission enough of just how popular it was. The difference being that while Republicans like Trump pretend to do populism while pandering for votes and then just help the ultra-rich instead, Democrats actually deliver on policies that serve the majority of Americans, opting not to just pander to the top 1%. And it's not just on infrastructure. On bill after bill, Democrats have actually delivered on legislation that helps regular people. They passed the American Rescue Plan, funding free vaccines and COVID tests. They passed the gun package, getting us a little closer to achieving those gun reforms that Republicans refuse to let pass even as mass shootings surge in this country. They passed the CHIPS Act, which will bring the semiconductor chip industry to the U.S., meaning more jobs. They passed the PACT Act, funding healthcare for sick veterans. They passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which invests in climate, allows the government to negotiate lower drug prices for people, caps out-of-pocket costs for seniors, and makes the rich pay their fair share. Biden forgave student loan debt for 43 million Americans. He pardoned every American convicted of marijuana possession and asked the HHS Secretary and the AG to start the process of removing marijuana as a Schedule I drug. Every single one of these things helps regular people. And when you add in the infrastructure law, it became clear exactly who this administration and who this party is advocating on behalf of. And just to be clear, it's not the same people being served by the GOP. So when those Republicans write their little letters fawning over the importance of infrastructure funding, just remember that they all use the tools at their disposal to deprive their own constituents of that very funding. So with November 8th only weeks away, voters should elect people who would defer to their needs and not reward those Republicans who threw those same voters under the bus trying to bolster their conservative bona fides with Sean Hannity. Send a message that these politicians are there to serve their constituents and not the other way around. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.